Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Movie Tales, where today we are looking at an entirely different genre than anything we have done before in a new subcategory of Movie Tales called Authentic Tales, where we're going to be looking at documentary films. We haven't done documentaries before. I do like documentaries. It's a harder topic to broach, especially on something like this when you're talking about film and story and all that stuff. But I think it is important, and if you are a fan of film, you should you should watch documentaries, because they're just as informative and interesting and can give you a new perspective in the way a movie does. So, to start off Authentic Tales, I thought we'd just do a nice and simple one. Go back in time a little bit and watch this documentary called High School. High School is a film from 1968. I watched a rendition of it that you can find on the Internet Archive. And what this documentary is, it's from a man called Frederick Wiseman. He's made a couple other docs that you can check out. It follows just the mundane day of a high school in the late 60s, just in the middle of America and everything going on with that. It's a very interesting watch. And as somebody who just seeing the way history has grown and changed, the way we've evolved in terms of our culture and all that kind of stuff, it's very fascinating to go back and see what high school was like 56 years ago. That's crazy to think about, because a lot has changed. There are literal scenes in this movie where you're seeing kids learning to use a typewriter. We don't even use that technology anymore. They don't even have these types of cameras. They don't have this type of aesthetic. They don't have these type of glasses. Everybody is wearing big, stupid glasses that have the weird, wing look to them. The ladies' glasses have that specific look that's very old school, and it's strange. And it's just so interesting to think that there's probably a majority of the people, especially the adults and the teachers of the faculty in this film, that probably grew up out without knowing what half the stuff is we have today. They might not know what an iPhone is, and that's so weird to think about, and I just love seeing that, because this movie is also coming out in 1968. It is a huge time in American culture in particular. They address the Vietnam War in this movie. They address the stuff with Martin Luther King Jr. in this movie. There is just so much being said in this one classroom of this one random day in this high school, and it's so interesting and weird to think about. I love that stuff so much. I am kind of a history buff, but the 20th century of history, where culture kind of started to exist as this thing that it's going to become, because I like popular culture so much. I like seeing the evolution of popular culture, and just this was a really interesting documentary. Now, I don't think it's perfect, and I do think there is a lot of just it's the 60s and certain things are said and done that are of the 60s. But, if you could go in with that mindset, there is something here that's worth exploring. And it's just very fascinating to see that. Now, this also broaches another topic I don't really talk about, and that is just the concept of high school alone. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I was an A-plus student, or that I enjoyed going to high school, or that it's ever been something I think is worthwhile. I do think this movie in particular as well, it shows you there is so much pressure put on these young people to figure out what they want to do with their lives and who they are supposed to be. And that is the part of school I don't really like. I don't think you should tell a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, you have to decide the rest of your life right now. It's never going to go that way for you. And even today, college and universities are very fucking expensive. They're expensive back then too. But it's so different. 56 years, and it's just easier to choose a path back then and just be stuck with it. But when you're today and you're young, you have all these other choices, all these other options, but no matter what you do, it's going to set you back something. And I just hate the idea of telling a young person whose brain isn't fully developed yet, you got to decide what your life's going to be. School is used for, in my opinion, and again, I know teachers, I have a lot of friends and family who are teachers. I think what school is best used for is giving kids and children of various ages, teenagers, social skills and just cues for what life should be like, how you interact, how you behave, the way to properly present yourself in certain situations. That's what schools should be. It shouldn't be about taking these tests and having this information about science or social studies or any of that stuff. It is important to know like the basis of that, but half the stuff you learn in school, whether it be analyzing a poem or learning the history of like particular war or any of that, or just what goes on in like a plant cell and that kind of shit, that's not important stuff. That's not going to help you get a job as like a construction worker or a lawyer or any of that shit. So it's very weird the things we actually like teach these kids. And what I find very fascinating about this documentary in particular is we see like the evolution of how things have changed today. Because I was in high school in the 2010s. That's when I was in high school. The stuff we talked about is not the same stuff that they are talking about here. It's very interesting to see that. We don't spend a lot of time like seeing like the classroom in session. It's just more like the end of this stuff. Like there's one sequence where one of the teachers is like, do you guys like this school? And this one kid who's wearing glasses, like sunglasses indoors, he's like, this school's a fucking joke, man. Like this education system, it's bullshit. And then you have this young African-American man who's like, I actually think there's like some good stuff we're learning here and some valuable lessons, and that kind of like ebb and flow of just like a teacher willing to take the criticism and just being like, all right, let's see what you got to say. What are you up to? What are you thinking? That's really interesting. I respect that a lot. There's also a sequence where a teacher is like, we're going to analyze a poem today, but not just any poem. It's a Simon and Garfunkel song. And I'm like, that's really cool. So then she's just like, I'm going to read you the poem that is this song. I forget what song it is. And then she's like, I'm going to just play it on the recorder. There we go. Tell me what you guys think this is. I'm like, that's pretty cool. But man, what a useless skill. You know, I like that stuff in school. Because that's where I excelled in, is the English like literature side of things and talking about that. Because I gave a shit about that. If you don't give a shit about Simon and Garfunkel, how are you going to react to listening to a song about it? And that's the other thing I really appreciated, is just every time we're in a classroom or watching an assembly or watching the marching band just walk to and from whatever the hell on a stage, it's just a realistic audience of kids. They're not paying attention too much. They're kind of just like making stupid jokes with their friends half the time. And that's what school should be about. That is where it's the most important, is developing those skills. And I love to see that. And there's a lot of just like zooming in on people just talking about shit, and it's very weird in some ways in that capacity. I'm not against it. But where I am against it is when we're in a gym class for a couple of teenage girls and we zoom in on a couple of butts. It's 1968. I'm aware of that. I know why you did it, you pervs. Like, it's just very weird that we're aware that this is a high school, and it's like, look at these little girls playing their, you know, sports in their little shorts. It's very weird. And and there's also some like very weird like censorship and conservativeness to a lot of the stuff going on here. And I love that. I love that we could talk about this stuff in school. I feel like this education part of stuff, the romantic and sex education, that has also shifted so much. So on the side of censorship, one of my favorite sequences is the principal has to talk to this one female student because the skirt she is wearing is too short. It goes above her knee. And she's like, well, I didn't know we had a dress code about that. I just wanted to wear this because I'm comfortable wearing this and I like to wear this. And he's like, yeah, I know. I'm not trying to censor you. I'm just saying some other people might be offended by that. And then you have an older woman, probably somebody in her 60s, who is just like, well, I think you look like a hussy and it's just disrespectful and gross. You can't wear that to prom. My husband, who is coming here for you kids, he's going to come to prom. He's not going to dress like a slut. I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. Because I love that so much. It's another one of my favorite things, is just that generation. The kids that grew up in the 60s. They are the counterculture generation. They grew up watching all this stuff. Endless wars going on overseas. TV inundated with just like bad politicians and a bunch of bullshit like that. Of course they don't give a shit how they dress. And the girl's wearing like stockings too, like her whole legs are covered up. It's not like she's showing leg. It's crazy. That sequence was just so interesting to me. So I'm like, that is just something so different. And we still have like these censorship things. The way I've always thought about it, and this is the other part about documentaries that we can get into, is exploring my opinions on a bunch of stuff. you should be allowed to wear what you want. There is, of course, going to be restrictions, like you can't show up naked, but if you want to show some leg, show some shoulder, you shouldn't, like, get angry at the student who is wearing that, and instead, make sure nobody comments on her in a negative way or says these things or harasses her about it. Teach those people to behave and not tell her to cover up. That's censorship. I'm all for not having censorship. But this is also about sex education, folks, and there's a couple things you need to learn. The first thing you need to learn, because a gynecologist tells us this, is that if you or your wife, because he says this to a room of dudes, I should just make that very clear. If you and your wife have had a bunch of sex with a bunch of different people, statistically speaking, you're going to get divorced. You should not have sex with other people unless it's your wife. Weird lesson to throw in there. And then, this sequence is weird too. Like, the sex education stuff, there's the whole thing with, like, the female reproductive system. I don't feel I need to explain that to you. I'm not going to explain that well. Let's just talk about the weird gynecologist man who turned have sex with your wife into a weird bit about, like, how girls age differently than boys. And all the boys are like, hell yeah, women are weird, man. It was just so weird to see, like, this grown man make sex jokes to a group of teenage boys and get a huge laugh. That was so weird to see. It was very uncomfortable and strange. But we just don't do that anymore. We are both more open about stuff sexually, but we're also more, like, afraid to talk about it openly in classes. Like, I don't feel a teacher would, like, directly talk to you about these things, whereas you see a bunch of, like, the teachers in this, they're just like, yeah, sex, it's weird, it's fine, I don't know, just have it or don't. Wear protection, who gives a shit, it's the 60s, baby. It's crazy, it's crazy. I do like it, though. There's a bunch of sequences where we're just watching, like, students get written up for, like, detention, like a bad boy punching a kid because they're starting an altercation, and the teacher's like, well, why would you do that? This doesn't give you the right to punch him. You son of a bitch. Just crazy stuff. I liked this nerdy kid with, like, big glasses who was just like, yeah, like, the teacher was yelling at me for something I didn't do, and I kind of took the blame for these other assholes, so I just, like, left the room and said, like, when you calm down, we could talk about this later. And then the teacher's like, you can't just leave a classroom. When your teacher's talking to you like that, you should respect your authority. He's like, why? Why should I? I didn't do anything wrong. He's like, well, you're getting a detention anyway. He's like, I'll do the detention in protest, but I don't believe this is my fault. And if this happens again, I'm going to be very pissed off. Oh, it's like, that energy is just crazy. Like, I connect so much, and I just love so much just kids. Like, why do we have these stupid rules? Why do I have to wear a skirt like this? Why am I getting in trouble for other people just because I am an easy target? Just all this random crap that we do. I just respect it so much. I love seeing that because, well, I don't think teenagers, like, fully know how to, like, say these things. They're never, like, in the right or in the wrong. I just think it's very interesting how they articulate themselves and how you make that feel. It's very fucked up to me to imagine that I am probably now closer to the age of some of, like, the teachers than I am to, like, the students. That's gonna, just remind me I'm aging. But also, this is kind of personal to me, just in terms of, like, the era it's from, because 1968 is the year my dad was born, and my grandmother was 17 or 18 when she had him. So she would be somebody this age, pregnant with my father. So I'm just like, this is the world she would have grown up in. And then the world after that's what my dad would have grown up in. I think that's so interesting. Crazy documentary. It ends with, like, a message from, like, a kid that went to the school who's now in the Vietnam War. And he's like, I don't have anything left. If I die there's going to be, like, my insurance, which is $10,000. You can use it like a scholarship to one of your kids. The other part of this is just seeing, like, parents talking to their kids about, like, what do you want your daughter's future to look like? I love the one dad who's just like, look, I want my daughter to be successful. Like, this big burly guy who just, like, she's getting good grades. I don't understand why it sounds like she's flunking. She wants to go to school. I'll get her to school. Like, I love that. Just varied accents of just, like, the 60s era, just, like, in the middle of the country. It's freaking crazy. The daughter's like, I want to be like a a beauty cosmetician or whatever it's called. You know, a hairdo lady. Cosmetician? Yeah, that'd be right. I know that was something they taught in my high school. I'll be honest with you folks. I was not a good student in high school. I would leave to go play Call of Duty with my friends or just, what's the point? I graduated. And all right, let's end it like this. I graduated high school because I had a teacher who had a film class, and I was one of the few people who was attentive in it, and we just talk about film and stuff. And he got me through it. I'm sure he gave me a lot of extra credits that I probably wouldn't have got elsewhere. I was also really good at writing essays about a book. That's the only reason I got out of there unscathed. But it's really hard to fucking fail high school unless you are actively not invested. High school is not that serious. If you are in high school watching this, I'm just going to tell you now, this means nothing. Once you get out, you have your whole life to figure out, and it's always going to be immensely better. The people you meet are going to move on and do other things. The feelings you had then, they're going to change and shift. You're going to develop into an individual. And 56 years ago, they were dealing with the same shit, except they didn't have an iPhone. They were barely learning how to use a typewriter. And every other teacher was like, well, you're a fat, ugly bitch, and you're never going to walk a fashion line. The fucking teacher. Sorry, I just keep remembering stuff that happens in this movie. The teacher who does, like, the fashion show. She's like, kids, come out. You're fat. Don't wear that. You're too fat to wear that. Okay, next one. You're way too fat to wear that. No, thanks, no you. And you girls, you don't know how to fucking walk. Let me show you how to walk. I'm going to show you how to walk. I'm a cool, sexy older lady. It's crazy. She wasn't that sexy. The sexiest teacher is the Simon and Garfunkel teacher. She's really cool. Great, Doc. I don't know. I had so much. It was just really interesting watching this. I don't know if I had fun. I was just like, this is crazy to think about. All these people are old now. 56 years ago. That's crazy. But I had fun. And for like the first documentary we're kind of talking about here, it's cool to look back on high school and just see like things are always the same, but the stuff they teach, the way they teach it, and how we behave, that's kind of different. It's a social place for kids to learn and do shit. I kind of dig that. I like that. So that's going to do it for this episode of Authentic Tales. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Stay in school, folks. Or don't. But you should. High school, at least. College is expensive.